Hello, this is going to be part 2 of the Okami New Game 90% Beginners video guide. If you missed what this guide is about, check out the start of the first video. When we left off, we had just finished up Shinshu 2, and now we're going to do Agata 1. This video will probably cover Agata 1 through the end of Tsuta Ruins. I'm not totally sure yet, and let's just get going. So right off, when you enter Agata 1 for the first time, you'll get a camera pan immediately over Shinshu, and when the camera stops panning, you'll get an Isun text, so get ready to skip it. From here, we need to go to the Guardian Sapling, which we can do right away because it's actually right below us. The fastest way to do that is to go a bit left here and then jump down and then turn right back onto the cliff so that you land right in front of this cave here. You might land a bit to either side depending on your positioning, just get in. Unfortunately there's a camera lock here, which makes it a bit annoying to conserve your dash through, but the Guardian Sapling's right here and we can't conserve dash through Guardian Sapling blooms, so it's not too important to go as fast as possible. From here, as soon as the camera shifts into this room, you can bloom the sapling and just skip the restoration cutscene. After that, there'll be a loading zone, but surprisingly there isn't Isun text here, so we can just get moving right away. The chest right in front of us here has the devout beads, but we don't want to pick them up because if we do, Isun will give us a tutorial, which is rather long because it's not skippable. So make sure you tackle to the left here, avoiding the chest, and then tackle again once you get through this camera shift because it's really hard to conserve dash here. Once you get to the end of this cave with another camera shift, you'll want to tackle and then do a ground jump over onto this island here because it's the fastest way to get into Waka's trigger for the Waka 1 fight. After a bit of time, this cutscene will start and then you can skip it. As soon as the fight starts, press start and then just mash A to use your first Steel Fist Sake. This will power up our cherry bombs so that we can defeat him very quickly, and this is a strategy we're going to be using a lot throughout the run, so keep it in mind. As soon as the start menu closes, you can brush and then just draw a cherry bomb in his way, preferably closer to him, and push it into him. Unfortunately right here he's jumping around. He did an attack where he throws his sword, so I jumped over it to avoid taking damage. Obviously whenever you take damage, if you take damage at all in a fight, you're going to get a bad grade for damage, or at least not a perfect grade, which means you'll lose some money. So to avoid that, we try to avoid taking damage whenever we have a fight that gives a lot of money, just so that we can get as much money as possible and not have to get treasures, which take time. If you do it correctly here, he should take 3 cherry bombs to defeat. Now one thing you have to keep in mind, in that case he blew up the cherry bomb with his sword attack, but you usually just have to push it into him. One thing you have to keep in mind when you're using this cherry bomb strategy to defeat enemies, or usually it's like mini bosses, one thing you might find is that if you draw a cherry bomb as soon as another cherry bomb explodes on the enemy, they'll sort of not take any damage, they'll just armor through it. And as far as I can tell, this is just because enemies, just like you, they get a bit of invincibility when they get hit. So make sure when a cherry bomb explodes on an enemy, make sure you wait a fraction of a second outside of the brush before you brush and draw another cherry bomb, so that if the second cherry bomb explodes right away, it doesn't explode during their invincibility. That way you don't waste cherry bombs, which is very important in that fight because you need 3 cherry bombs and you only have 3 ink pots right now. After this Waka fight, you're going to spawn on that island, if I remember correctly. Then you're just going to want to come over here to this island with the 2 buds. This bud here has a Holy Bone S, which we do not need, but this bud has a Lactoware set, which is a pretty good treasure for money. You don't need to pick this up, I'm pretty sure, in this money route, but if you want to be safe, like just in case you do poorly on fights or miss some other money, you might want to pick this one up. It does take about like maybe 5 to 10 seconds to get, so well, you're in the beginner's route, so timing isn't that important. After that, you're going to want to just hop over to this island and talk to Kokari here twice. And then immediately after, tackle him and skip again. So all 3 of those, you're going to be basically mashing start. Then once this cutscene starts, you're going to be wanting to hold the fast text button, because this text isn't skippable. As soon as all the text ends, start mashing B to cancel that fishing tutorial, and then hold brush so that you can brush right away to draw the fishing line. Pick whichever fish is closest and just draw it, and then hold fast text again to make sure this cancels as quickly as possible. From here, the strategy here is that we're just going to hold the opposite direction of the fish's path, and then mash all of the face buttons. Normally, the game doesn't intend you to just hold a direction with Kakari. It kind of wants you to like tap left and right to gradually bring the fish in, as a way of conserving Kakari's stamina. The thing is, we're only catching 3 fish here, so Kakari's stamina is never going to run out unless you really mess things up. So it's totally fine to just hold a direction. It'll drag the fish in a bit quicker. As soon as that happens, you want to mash all the face buttons because it chooses a face button at random to make you press. But you can, like, if you just lay your thumb across like this, you can just mash them all at the same time, and that'll just instantly, without having to react to which prompt you're given, it'll catch the fish. In that case, I messed up the power slash, so for all of these, you just need to power slash them once. You can press the brush as soon as you press the face button, so if you react to that. Also, for these prompts, you want to be holding the fast text button because these are also text. That's not skippable. So we're just going to repeat that 3 times, or well, 2 more times. The fish technically all have different value, and you can get the higher value fish by going for the larger fish shadows, but it's not that important. The money difference isn't that big. It's only a few hundred yen, so don't stress out about which fish you get. In that case, I accidentally drew a dot before, so the power slash didn't go through. But I had enough time because I did the first power slash early for another power slash before it went back into the water. At this point, you just have to hold fast text through the end of this, through the end of catching the giant salmon, and then there's going to be a cutscene where the giant salmon spits out the key after this loading screen. And here's where you want to start mashing start for this cutscene. From here, you want to tackle away from Kakari because he's going to try and smack you and take the key out of your hands like this. We don't want that to happen, so just go over here, away from him. From here, there's this curse patch here, and right next to it are 2 buds. The one that's closer to the curse patch, you actually do need to get. This is a Exorcism Slip S. If you remember, we got one of these earlier for the campfire fight in Hana, and they're quite useful. We're going to be using a lot of Exorcism Slips, and we're going to need at least 2 of them for the end of this dungeon, for the boss fight. So we're going to get some of them on the way. From here, you want to just run to the gate. One thing that might happen is you can accidentally drop the key when you get the Exorcism Slip. Because the fast text button is the same button as the bite button, and the bite button also releases items you've bitten, if you bite the key, well, you bite the key to get it from Kakari. If you use the fast text button to mash through to skip through the text for getting the Exorcism Slip, if you press it early, you'll drop the key, which will then despawn as you make your way over here, because it's not in your mouth. And then if that happens, you'll have to run back to Kakari to go get the key again. To avoid that happening, just be extra mindful that you don't press the X button before the prompt comes up for the Exorcism Slip. If you want to check whether you still have the key in your mouth on your way here, just bark. When you're biting items, you cannot bark, so if you hear Ami bark, that means you dropped the key and you need to go back and get it. Anyway, from here we're just going to dash straight into the Tsuta Ruins. Interestingly, Tsuta Ruins is one of the few places where like the major area camera pan doesn't start when you enter the area. Instead, the trigger's somewhere like over there. So we can actually skip the camera pan because the trigger is not quite big enough. In order to do that, we're going to want to tackle right away, jump to your right here, and then jump on this pattern of wall and tackle over here, over the tree's roots. This is not the easiest trick. If you want to practice this, I recommend before you enter Tsuta Ruins to go back out and save at Madame Fawn's, because that's the closest save mirror, and then repeatedly try to get over this cutscene without hitting it until you do for the first time. From there, don't just like grind it out, because there's a faster practice method for this, which is after the end of the dungeon, when you beat the first boss, you'll get a save prompt, and that save prompt actually drops you right outside Tsuta Ruins when you load it, which is a lot closer than Madame Fawn's. So as long as you still have the cutscene trigger here from skipping it the first time, you can repeatedly practice skipping it in the same exact way from the save marker that's right outside Tsuta Ruins. Unfortunately, you can't use this save mirror because this save mirror, I believe it's within the trigger, or at least it's very close, and you can't get back over the trigger from behind. Not easily, anyway. So that's how I would recommend practicing this trick. If you want like another look at it, I believe Giant Cookie Jar has a video on it because he discovered this particular cutscene skip. From here, we're going to want to jump over these vines here. This chest has a vase, which is worth about 1,000 yen. We don't really need it, it's not really worth it, but if you want to pick it up for safety, you can. There's going to be a lot of treasures like that. Basically every treasure, pretty much, is not necessary, but it will make your money route a bit more reliable and a bit more safe in case you do poorly on fights. This is an incense burner, which is almost worth as much as a lacquerware set, so it's probably worth picking up. From here, you're going to want to jump and then tackle into this trigger. Ideally, you've conserved gold dash into this trigger because it helps make this skip a bit more consistent, which is you want to jump here, jump over this corner, and then air tackle onto this ledge. If you do it very well, you don't actually need the air tackle at the end, but it only works with gold dash. If you have no dash, you can still make this particular version of the skip, but only with the air tackle. If you mess up the skip, the easiest way to do the backup is to use the same kind of corner glitch that we used when we were doing lily pad skip the first time, and use that to get the wall jump over here. Unfortunately, this corner, I believe, doesn't really work for this. Oh, it does. Never mind. But it's a bit farther from like that shore over there, so it's a bit easier to get over here from here. Besides that, this is supposed to be the second time you're required to use the lily pad. So obviously we can't do it the intended way, so we have to use some kind of wall jump or corner glitch. Here, this is technically optional, but it's a bit convenient to get, which is this Steelfish Sake. You'll definitely need this if you forgot to buy 2 of them at Shinshu Field. But other than that, we're just going to want to go right here, and then go to this fight trigger. We can skip the intro cutscene for this enemy. And this enemy is the Bud Ogre. The strategy for this one is going to be pretty simple and pretty consistent. We're going to want to attack it twice, wait for it to jump in a direction. It's very hard to predict exactly where it'll jump normally, and then just draw a bomb where it'll land. You can also like do one attack and then bomb it from its damage recoil animation, which then it'll fly around and you'll have to attack it again. I think that's a bit slower and a bit less reliable, so I prefer attacking it twice and then waiting for it to jump. From there, you're going to want to hold fast text and position the camera so that the center of the screen is near the Bud Ogre, so that you can draw bloom after Isun gives you the tutorial on this. From there, you're going to want to attack it once and then power slash it twice. You can do that in any order. You can like power slash 1, attack, and then power slash again. Either way works, whichever you find most comfortable. From there, you'll probably run out of ink. If you messed up the cherry bomb, you might have run out of ink before the end of that fight. And if that happens, my recommendation is going to be just use your ink refill now. So the way we do ink restores is, as long as you have enough praise, if you upgrade your ink, it'll make it full, no matter how much ink you had already, which we'll be using a few times later on in this dungeon. If you use one of them early, it's okay, but it might make a later segment slower because we would prefer to use the ink upgrade there instead. From here, the game intends you to push this ball down this slope and onto this switch to open this door. But pushing balls is slow, as we saw in Hana Valley. So instead, we're going to try and just draw a cherry bomb all the way over there from here. It's a lot easier if you get closer, but it obviously takes time, so we're just going to try and draw it there. In that case, you can see I was a bit slow, so I can get a bit closer. If you ever draw a cherry bomb and you want it to disappear faster, you can just power slash it, by the way. Hidden technique that the game doesn't tell you about. Then from there, we can just get through this door, so we have plenty of time before the cherry bomb blows up. If by the time you're in this door, the door will stay open, so it's not going to shut on you. It'll actually open from behind anyway, but it's not a big deal. From here, we're going to want to jump into this trigger, and we're going to want to skip right away, because this triggers the fight for 2 Butt Ogres. And unfortunately, it's a lot slower to do the same strategy we did before, so we're going to use a slightly different strategy here, where we're going to use one of our SFS to power up our Cherry Bomb, so that we don't need to hit them. As soon as they jump, draw a Cherry Bomb right about next to one of the rightmost Butt Ogre. They always spawn in the same position, so this is very reliable. And you're going to want to, if they don't land on it, just push it into them. Then you're going to want to angle your camera so that you can bloom both of them at once. From here, you want to power slash them both. If you run out of ink, which you should in this fight, just ink again. If you wait for your ink to restore, they'll get up. They won't be stunned long enough. So you really do have to use your ink upgrade here. And just power slash them both 3 times, and that should kill them. Just don't wait for your ink upgrade, because you don't want them to get up, because that means you have to start basically the whole fight over again, more or less. From here, you're just going to want to build dash, although this isn't strictly necessary, because it's very hard to conserve dash through this next trick. But do it if you can. It doesn't hurt. From here, we're going to want to get on top of this log. This log here gives us just enough height to get up to that ledge with this technique here that I'm going to show you. This skip is not that easy, but it's pretty easy to practice. It also doesn't save that much time. But you can see here, it allows us to skip growing these mushrooms, which causes an unskippable cutscene, and it's quite annoying. So we would prefer to do it another way if we can, and we can. So normally the intended way is you draw sun here and it grows the mushrooms. If you want to do that, it's technically easier, but it'll waste a bit of time. If you want to practice this trick, just go down from here and repeatedly get up here. One common way to fail it is like if you don't get enough height and you do the air tackle into this wall, you might not bounce up, you'll bounce basically in place and then fall down. That means you didn't have enough height, basically. So make sure you're getting as much height as possible with every step of that jump. From here, we can just, if you lose your dash through that trick, which most likely will happen, you can just tackle, and we're going to want to get through this wall with a Cherry Bomb, jump over here, just to move a bit faster, and take a line through here. Through this door, we're going to jump because there's a cutscene trigger, which you cannot skip. And having dash here is pretty important. From here, we're going to want to do a dash restore, and then more importantly, make sure your camera is inner camera and hold X, the fast text button, because this trigger here is an auto stop, and it's not skippable. So we have to hold fast text through it. Fortunately, if you press the fast text button while you're dashing, it won't start Ami digging, which means there's no consequence to holding it early and just preparing yourself. From here, we're going to want to jump straight down into Blockhead, and then just into his trigger, skip, and then tackle him again. The pattern here is totally randomized, and also it's order dependent. You have to do them. You have to like press the dots in the order they show up. You can get a bit unlucky here with like the spacing of them, but it's not going to lose you a huge amount of time. If you mess it up, if you mess up the pattern, because it can be a bit precise, just stay near Blockhead and take a hit if you have to from the rubble that he drops from the ceiling, and then just tackle him again as soon as you can. From here, we can just grab this key right away, or if you want to play it safe for the boss fight at the end of this dungeon, you can go back out through this door and go get the exorcism slip that's here. This will make the fight a bit easier, but it's not strictly necessary, and I prefer to go without it because it's by far the slowest exorcism slip to get. Instead, you can just get this key. We can go over here and conserve dash, and we're just going to use wall jumps to get up this because going up the log is too precise to do quickly. So we're just going to use wall jumps to get around. Technically a bit slower, but not by a whole lot. We bring the key up to this lockjaw, and make sure you jump into the lockjaw trigger to conserve dash, because those are not auto stops. From here, there's going to be this blue scroll. You don't want to get too close to it, because if you do, it'll aggro, and then you'll have to break the barrier to get out of the fight. Fortunately, I've discovered a way to get around this trigger without too much difficulty. This seems pretty reliable. So I'm going to put my word on the line here. If you wall jump over here, the scroll won't aggro you while you're in the air, and outside of its boundaries, and its boundaries end at the wall, but you can see the wall slopes in a bit here. So if you're wall jumping and you're over here, you're not within its aggro zone, which means it won't attack you. So that reliably gets you around the blue scroll without having to fight it. Alternatively, like depending on its position, you might just be able to run through, but that only saves a fraction of a second, so I don't bother. From here, we're going to want to restore the bridge, and we can actually move around during this restoration cutscene. So you can just hold forward and dash over the bridge as soon as it appears. We're going to want to jump into here, because there's a big camera pan here, and we're going to have to move around a lot in this room. This is the triple gate room. There's going to be 3 major fights here. They're all fights we've done before, pretty much, and we're going to do them in pretty much the same way as we've done them. The only thing is, these first 2 fights have extra enemies. So this is a Bud Ogre fight, but there's 2 red imps. Fortunately, if we draw a cherry bomb, a red imp will be instantly destroyed by a cherry bomb. So we can use that. If we're clever, we can, or if we're lucky on the positioning, we can actually, with the same cherry bomb that we use to make the Bud Ogre vulnerable, we can blow up both of the red imps, depending on their spacing. But you have to get pretty lucky for that to happen. From here, these medium solar sun fragments will spawn at the end of each of these fights, because they think they're harder, so they want to give you some free health, I guess. If you run into them, just hold the X button and hold the direction that Ami's facing so you don't lose your dash. From here, this next fight is going to be a yellow imp with 2 green imps. Once again here, we can get lucky with the cherry bomb exploding. So in that case, I took out 1 of the green imps. But other than that, the fight's pretty normal. You can technically do these fights in any order, but just movement-wise, this is probably the fastest way to do it. And then this last fight is exactly the dead fish fight that we had twice already. So we're going to hope we get lucky on the spread. Here they're kind of spread far apart, so I wouldn't say this is very lucky. So from here, I'm going to build dash at the end, and watch carefully what I'm going to do here. At the end of the fight, I'm going to jump, hold R3 to get the camera behind me. Unfortunately, it didn't work there for some reason. And then I'm going to pan the camera up while it's still in brush mode at the end of the fight, and draw a sun. And then I'm going to skip this as fast as I can. Unfortunately, I didn't quite get it. I guess I drew the sun too early. If you do that correctly, the mushrooms will grow instantly after the cutscene, which saves a small amount of time panning the camera here. If that doesn't happen, just draw the sun again and grow the mushrooms. Unfortunately, there's nothing you can do to skip this cutscene. In earlier versions, I know that you can skip it but the window is extremely narrow. Like, it's a couple of frames basically to press start twice. I don't know if that's possible in the remake versions, but it might be. In any case, once you load from here, we don't actually want to climb up the mushrooms because it's slow. And then we can actually break those pots with power slashes, which means we can do it from farther away. In order to get into position for it, we want to go over here, dash into this wall with outer camera, and then tackle to gain as much height as possible. And then we're just going to drag the camera up to the top left and line up the camera so that we can draw a single line through all of the pots. And if we did it correctly, we should get a white fade out right away. Unfortunately, I messed it up. Yeah, it seems like I missed this last pot, which can happen. It's rather difficult to get the line consistently every time, but it's not too bad if you mess it up and have to do it again. From here, we're going to skip 3 cutscenes. This last one takes a bit of time for Ethan to talk. And if we didn't mess up our dash restores, we should still have dash here. From here, you can jump around and then get down here without falling into the water. And there's another treasure here which we can pick up if you want to play it safe. This is another lacquer set, so good value. After that, we want to leave the room right away. And now that we've restored Tsuta, we can go get Vine, which is going to be our immediate next objective. Fortunately, there's a shortcut here. You can just jump down and then jump off here into the tree, and we can conserve dash into the tree because it's technically the same area. From here, we're gonna want to restore all of these. They're technically cutscene warps, so you don't have to get too close to them. But just for the sake of making this quick, we can. When you're drawing to restore a curse patch, basically how well you cover it like this doesn't matter. It's actually just about how much ink you put down at all on the curse patch. So if you just like did this on a tiny portion of the curse patch, it would still be just as fine as doing this on the whole curse patch, as long as they're both only on the curse patch. What matters is how much ink you put down, which means the fastest way to do these is to just draw a few circles like this. Also, like using the thick stroke here doesn't make a difference. It just matters the amount of time you're moving the brush around, basically. For me, I find drawing like 6 circles like this is pretty reliable, and it'll work every time. And that's pretty much the fastest way to do it. So that's what you're going to want to do for all 3 of these. As soon as this happens, there's going to be another constellation. This one has good guidelines for where you can place the stars. Pretty much these circles for the symbols are where you can place the stars, so you can just do it like this, and it'll usually work. But it's not that strict. From here, we're just going to want to skip again, and then hold the brush button and draw a vine here, and then skip again. After this, the game intends for you to climb up this interior and like get to the top of the dungeon. That's a bit slow, so we're going to leave the tree. If you want to be really fast, you can do a bit of a weird clip here in order to sort of clip directly into the room before the boss. But that's a rather difficult trick. I wouldn't recommend that you do it in the beginner's route because it only saves like 15 seconds. So instead I'm just going to show you what I recommend doing in the beginner's route, which is as soon as you get out here, jump and then vine to this first flower. Turn around mid-vine and then vine to the second flower. And before you hit this flower, before Ami gets all the way to this flower, vine to the next flower by angling the camera over here to get this flower to appear, and then just draw a vine. And be careful with this one. If you miss, you'll fall into a really long camera pan, which lasts about 15 seconds. And it triggers as soon as you land on that flower, so there's nothing you can do. And then from here, we can do the same trick again. Once you run out of ink here, use your next ink restore if you still have it. And then on the way down, start drawing these vines. We can actually jump in midair from landing in that vine for some reason. And we can use that to make this a bit easier in terms of camera angles. Either way, just get all 4 in. That'll open up the top of the dungeon, and you can jump down into the boss room. You can still conserve dash here if you've managed to do it so far, but that's not the most reliable. In any case, just dash through this tunnel. You can use outer camera here even though it's a small area to make a straighter line, but it's not a big deal. We're just going to go straight into this portal, skip, and then mash confirm. So it's skip, confirm, skip, but you can just mash both of them at the same time while holding the fast X button, which I do this particular posture for it. So I hold X with my index finger and mash start and A with both thumbs. From here, just tackle, because there is going to be this right away that you can skip. If you go through the golden gate, there'll be another cutscene where Isun tells you about what golden gates do. We can just skip that by jumping over the golden gate. We're going to skip this cutscene, and then right away here, you don't need to actually vine yourself around the Spider Queen, because notice the camera's center is between you and the Spider Queen, which means we can actually pan the camera around the Spider Queen and get enough of an angle in order to vine her behind, and then we can do that again here, which is a lot faster than getting behind her. As soon as those flowers disappear, press start. If you were watching carefully, you would notice that all of the flowers exploded into petals. That's your signal that the Spider Queen is now vulnerable to damage. So from here, just use all of your exorcism slips if you collected 2 or 3. And then right away, you can start power slashing the eyes on her back. If you're careful, you can do 3, and that'll kill all of them. But if you miss, unfortunately, you'll have to wait until your ink restores. Fortunately, unlike the Blood Ogres, she's vulnerable long enough that you can just hold the brush button and do it again. But ideally, you'd get all 3 power slashes in one try. If you have 3 exorcism slips, you only have to get 2 power slashes correct, which means it's a lot more reliable. But unfortunately, it's a lot slower as well. From here, you're going to get a save prompt. Hold fast text to make the options appear faster, and then just select no, because saving and loading a save isn't allowed in the run anyway, so you don't want to do it. However, like I said at the beginning of the dungeon, if this is your first run, I would recommend pressing yes and making a save here so that you can go straight back into the dungeon and practice the cutscene skip for the intro the introductory camera pan to Tsuta Ruins. Once you get out, there'll be a cutscene where you hand Ume back to Kakari. At that point, you're just going to want to skip, and then we're going to want to dash out. Give me a second. I have to take off a jacket. We're going to be dashing out. And you're going to want to go over here, near the House of Karude. And you're going to want to get over here and do a dash restore out of the water. Restore this bud. This will get you an Infinity Stone, which is a pretty expensive item that we're going to be using later. Then we want to go up and activate the Mermaid Spring. Mermaid Springs are going to be important later as a way of getting back to areas that we've been already that we need to go to again. This Mermaid Spring will activate as soon as you get here, so what I like to do is use R3 to turn myself around quickly as soon as I reach like roughly this area. You can tell that it's activated as soon as you see the green sparkles coming up from it, and at that point you can just turn around. You don't have to get any closer, and we're going to go to the river so that we can do the bridge minigame. So just run over here. You can jump over this fence if you're precise. And we just want to jump into this trigger here, which is right where Kakari is. And here you're going to skip this cutscene, and then at this point we have to wait a few seconds. The pattern here, if you do it the same way every time, you'll always get the same pattern of flowers. Like it starts the same way and then it adapts to whether you fail flowers or not. So if we get them all correctly, we can do this consistently. So the first flower is always going to appear on the top right as the camera pans towards the left, so they sort of fake you out there. You need pretty good timing to get this, but it's not too hard. Then the next flower will appear on the right away, and you have to wait a bit for the next one. Try to be precise with these, try not to mess any of them up, because messing them up wastes more time than taking a couple extra seconds to get them correct the first time. This next one, if you get it on like some of the first fraction of a second it's on screen, then you can just hold brush for the next one, which is right over there. But if you're too slow, then it'll scroll off screen before you can get to it. In this case I was just fast enough, and I was able to get the first 6 flowers that showed up. If you're too slow on the 5th flower, just wait for the 6th flower to scroll by and get the 7th flower, which will come in like a couple seconds anyway. Not wasting that much time. And from here we just want to jump into this portal and skip Isun's text, and that'll take us to Taka Pass. There'll also be a text trigger that'll happen as soon as this place loads, which is for here, for Isun telling us about the Curse Zone. And from here, I think I'm going to close this segment off for now. The segment wasn't too long. We got through it pretty quickly because there wasn't as much to explain. But I think this is enough for this segment. So thank you for watching. If you have any questions, as I always say, you can ask in the comments on my Twitter or in the Okami Discord, where there'll be plenty of people to help you. You may also want to take a look at the text guide for the corresponding segment of the run, because it might have information that I've neglected to mention here. And otherwise, ciao.